Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, host COS today, along with co-host Mr. Ken Kashuba, our Indiana State Communications Coordinator. How you doing, Ken?
I'm doing pretty good, Dale. How about yourself?
Just fine, just fine. Was reviewing with Ken as to how many tornadoes he got caught up in here recently.
It was a wild weather pattern, wasn't it?
We had some bad weather, did we, come through Indiana?
I think it's one of the worst storms that I've been in living here in Indianapolis in a long, long time.
Is that right? Really?
Yeah.
Well, of course, as you know, I'm up in Fort Wayne. I'm in northern Indiana. We just kind of caught the edge of it, but so we were fortunate. But yeah, that was scary. Well, listen, Ken. Tonight we've got a jam-packed show again. We're going to be talking about university endowments, and we're going to be touching on sanctuary cities, and we've got some other reports on Doge and judicial overreach. We got a lot of things going on. Let's just jump right into our first segment here on university endowments. Brett Sturley, one of our contributors and state director for Convention of States in Missouri, has put this together for us. So let's just jump right into it, Ken. All right?
Sounds good.
Well, greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, host COS today. Well, you've probably heard in the news here lately quite a bit about university endowments. And especially, it's been a part of the conversation with protests that are going on at some of our universities across the country. So I thought we would take some time and talk about university endowments. And I asked one of our contributors, Brett Sturley, to delve into this topic, and he's agreed to do it. So let's bring Brett on right now. Hi, Brett.
Hello, Dale. How are you doing?
Brett is one of our COS Today contributors and has been doing some reports on very interesting topics. Recently just completed a report on tariffs, and that turned out to be a 3-part report. We just finished completing that. So, and he's agreed to do some follow-up on tariffs because, as you all know, they're causing a lot of turmoil in the country today. So, but anyway, today, Brett, as I said, Brett is one of our contributors and is also the state director for Convention of States, Missouri. So I've asked Brett, and he has agreed to talk about university endowments. And so, Brett, I want to thank you for doing this, and let's get started.
Well, Dale, I appreciate the invitation back, and I'll keep doing this as long as I don't run off the listeners, and your viewers. So I hope that it's
so far so good. I'll tell you, so far so good. Okay,
there we go. Well, I'm learning an awful lot as well as we go through these exercises. But yeah, you mentioned that university endowments and just university's been in the news period with the Trump administration, cutting off some of the government money that goes to, I think Columbia was just cut off just about 10 days ago,
right?
Because of their DEI and their basically coddling of anti-Semitic Hamas terrorist sympathizers, basically is what they are. And so it's really poisoned several of our college campuses. But like you said, there's been some attack against their endowments. They have all this money, and I wanted to kind of delve into this just a little bit. First, I guess let's define what an endowment is. An endowment is actually it's a fund that the university holds in assets. Could be money, could be stock gifts, could be property gifts, and the primary use of that endowment is to fund university projects, possibly subsidize sports, subsidize athletics, academic endeavors that the university participates in, and some of these are pretty sizable, and these are all funded by like past graduates, alumni, some different foundations, Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie Institute.
Now, if I'm an alumni and I want to contribute to the school's endowment, I can do that. Can I specify how I want that money spent, or is it open, or is it just a gift?
Well, first they'll gladly take your money. That's for sure.
Yes.
That won't be a problem. They'll accept the check.
No problem there. Okay.
No, won't be a problem at all. And I don't know. I would imagine that the rules vary from school to school. If I'm giving I would imagine that you should be able to say, like, if I give $100 a month, I'm going to do this. I want to do something for my school. I'm going to give $100 a month, and I want to target that towards the business school. Then there will be a fund, in most universities, to where that would go to fund the business school. I would imagine some just go into a general fund, just like, hey, you give us money and we'll do whatever we want to with it.
Okay.
Whenever you talk about in some of the larger dollar donations, to where possibly somebody might an entrepreneur, very successful, and hey, you want to build this new building for academics, for say arts and sciences.
Okay.
Well, I want to go ahead, and I was an arts and science major here at this university, and I was pretty successful. So I am going to donate $10 million to build this specific building. And by the way, I want my name on that building too. And so that would be something to where, if you're talking about some of those larger dollar donations, I would definitely think that if that's going to be a condition of the university getting your money, they're going to listen to you and do pretty much what you want done with that money.
Now, government doesn't contribute to the endowments. Am I correct?
Well, this is where money is fungible.
Okay.
And so Columbia University, I think, would get something ridiculous, like $600 million or something like that from the federal government. And that was annually. And so they could say that, no, that doesn't directly go into the endowment, but we use that $600 million for something that we would normally use the endowment money for. And so indirectly,
I see what you're saying.
It's all a big pot of money. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. All right.
So whenever I started to, on the heels of the unconstitutional loan forgiveness, quote unquote, because it's not forgiveness, it's just shifting loan payments onto the taxpayers, that occurred during the Biden administration, I started thinking a few months ago, what's another way to where we can get the federal government out of funding school tuition, underwriting school tuition, and what's the best way to do that?
Okay.
And so that's where I came up with I guess what I thought is changing the university tuition funding paradigm.
Must be a good time for the first slide, huh?
It's a great time for the first slide. You're right on it. So when I was doing some research, I was wanting to go through and say, okay, well, what size of endowments are we looking at? So I put here on the next slide the top 10 university endowments, and this will blow your mind.
Now, I've always heard in the news that Harvard was the largest one, and sure enough, it is, isn't it? Okay.
They are. Their endowment is almost $52 billion.
My goodness.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And you looked at, of course, your Harvard University is a private university, but then you have the University of Texas system, which is not a private university. Their endowment is $47.5 billion. Then you have obviously Yale, Stanford, Princeton, MIT.
Right.
Those are all prestigious Ivy League schools. I don't believe that Penn I believe that's a state university, so that's at $22 billion. Texas A&M, Public University, $20 billion. Michigan, same thing, University of California.
See, Michigan, now that's surprising to me. Michigan, I didn't. Wow.
They have some really some wealthy graduates apparently. So that's, and also you look and it really doesn't. It's really not much of a surprise because you look at some of these universities that are Ivy League universities. They've been around for 250 years,
right?
And so they have a long runway to build these endowments. But I have some data here. I just want to really just want to go through and kind of give you a feel of this. So if you look at Harvard University with their endowment, almost $52 billion, where their annual tuition is over $56,000. Now that is school tuition. That is not room and board. That does not include housing.
Wow.
Housing's probably another $20,000 a year. And so that is the cost of going to Harvard University. And you look at the other, even though these state-run universities like University of Texas, Penn, Texas A&M, you're still looking between $40,000 and $50,000. Michigan University's their tuition's even higher than what Harvard's is. But Yale's tipping the scales at $64,700. My goodness! Wow! So this is and then you look at. So then what I did is I took a look at, okay, this endowment tuition coverage. Okay, with their endowment, if I divide their annual tuition, how many students education would that fully fund if that endowment was only used specifically for student tuition? Well, Harvard, their endowment at their current tuition rate would fund the enrollment for 919,137 students. So quite a bit. University of Texas is 1.1 million. So there's lots of coverage for lots of students. Well, obviously Harvard does not have 919,000 students. Actually, their 2024-25 enrollment was 28,587. So the years of coverage, then I just took and say, okay, if I divide the number of students that the endowment would actually fully fund by the current enrollment, then they would be able to fund 32 years worth of students at their current enrollment rate with their current endowment. So there is a large pot of money there for sure, and there's lots of resources for that university. And this just kind of begs the question in my mind: why is the federal government giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Harvard University whenever they have a $52 billion endowment? They don't seem very needy to me. So I think that there's lots of stuff that they could do with their own funds. And I would dare say that if they came up with if they went to their donor base and said, hey, we just got $400 million a year yanked away from us from the federal government. We had this allocated for these projects. Oh, woe is me. Will anybody help us? I'm relatively sure that they would have some more donors step up and say, you know what? Yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll make up that difference because this is important.
Now, yeah, you have to understand, as you pointed out when you first started, that these endowments, those monies go to various different areas, various different projects. So
sure.
They couldn't fund tuition for everyone all the time, but anyway, it's still a tremendous amount of money.
It certainly is. And so if you flip to the next slide there, graphically it goes through, and on the next slide, this is the top 25 university endowments, and so the blue bar chart is the size of the actual endowment, going from left to right, from Harvard to Ohio State University, which has the 25th largest endowment, coming in just under around $9 billion. Actually, the actual number is just under $8 billion, $7.9 billion.
Is it? Okay.
So, and then the green line graphically shows the annual tuition for that associated college with that endowment. So, for instance, Ohio State University, with that nearly $8 billion endowment, their annual tuition is $40,022. And so the point of this graph is you look, the size of the endowment doesn't really have a lot of effect on the price of tuition. These tuition prices are still between $40,000 and $70,000, or right at $70,000, which that's Duke University is at $69,140. That's the high point of the top 25 universities. So there's not the size of the endowment doesn't really, of the elite schools, is not correlated with the size of the university endowment.
Brett, I'm going to make this a little larger.
Yeah.
We're going to disappear, but we're not going away. So don't worry. There. Okay.
Sure. And this data is gathered from a website called collegetransitions.com. So that's where this information came from. And then the tuition amounts, that's for the endowment part. The tuition amounts actually came from the university websites, each of the university websites. So that's what they reported. And again, this is only tuition. This is not any type of living expenses, dorm expenses, meal plans, anything else like that. It looked like from my research that was anywhere between $15,000 and $20,000 additionally a year.
In looking at this slide, I noticed some very interesting more schools here. I notice I don't see Indiana University on here, and I don't see Purdue, but I do see Notre Dame. And of course, that's a private school,
right?
But
well, and then right there in the middle, and this was kind of surprising to me, Washington University. That's not Washington State. That's Wash U in St. Louis.
That's in St. Louis. That's right. That's right.
And so they're a very large they have a large medical program. They're a research hospital, and their endowment's just right at $12 billion, and it costs $68,240 a year to attend there.
Yeah.
And for their 8,267 students, very, very difficult to get in. I had a friend of mine try to get into the a friend of the family tried to get into the nursing program there, and there were tens of thousands of applicants, and they were seating maybe like 30 or 40 at this one time. So it's extremely exclusive. You have to have just all your credentials have to be pretty well impeccable to get into that school, which I have no problem with.
Of course, there's the Ohio State University there. Wonder how much goes to their football program. I just
well, their football program is self-funded. Their football program, both at like schools like at Ohio State and Michigan, they pretty well fund the whole entire athletic program.
Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, those are massive money makers.
All right. Well, that's an interesting graph. Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I definitely thought that it was. We go ahead and flip to the next slide. We've got a little bit more data, and I know if you rewatch this, you can pause and at points to look at specific things, specific items, because there's a lot of data to go through. So just some basic, we looked at the premier universities. So just some other university funding statistics. The average university.
I'll tell you, Brett. I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but we're running out of time for this segment.
Okay.
So this part. So why don't we, before you get into this one, why don't we take a break here? And can you come back and finish it up for us?
That works for me, and we'll delve into these other miscellaneous statistics that kind of gives you a little bit better picture of the landscape, and then my concept, my idea, harebrained or not, you be the judge on how to change how we fund how student tuition is funded.
Okay, so thanks thank you very much, Brett. And we'll take a break here, folks, and be back with you very shortly. Thank you. Well, let me get ourselves back on here, Ken. There we go.
There you go. Well, Dale, I don't want to jump ahead of Brett's idea yet, but we did have a comment from one of our regulars. Matter of fact, one of our panelists as usual. Our friend Gary Harwell has an idea, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this up.
Okay.
He says, when a university applies for a grant, government should say yes to half of the request if the university draws the other half out of the request from its endowment. Not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea. Well, we're gonna get to we're gonna take a break here, like I said, and we're gonna delve into some other things, and then we're gonna come back and play part 2 of that interview with Brett, and there'll be a point at the end there as to what should we do type thing. So it'll be very interesting. So hope everyone will find it very interesting. Anyway, Ken, why don't we take the time now and you tell us a little bit about that QR code up in the corner.
Yeah, that QR code, that basically is our subscription QR code. Subscription is not a good word. Our volunteer support QR code is what it really is. It basically says you support our programming and the things we're doing here. And for that, we reward you with a number of our regular contributors. Their segments, and many of those go back quite a way. So you get to see the whole gamut of contributors that we are dealing with here at COS today, along with some things like some special links to special websites and some information that's helpful, along with a platform that allows you to basically mingle amongst the volunteers and the supporters. So hit that with your camera and give us your name and email, and we'll get you put into our volunteer subscriber. Again, I'm saying subscriber, our supporter QR code, and I'll list a URL in the chat box too.
All right. Ken, I'm going to switch views here and see if that's a little bit. That's where I wanted to be.
Yeah, I was getting a little too close to myself there.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks.
Right.
We're still learning this program and how it works. You notice we've switched sides now. I don't know how that happens. Anyway, all right, good.
Much time on the left as you do on the right, Dale. We're kind of we like to be open to both sides.
Is that what it is? Oh,
yeah, we like to be open to both sides in this program. We welcome opposing viewpoints. I mean, we'd love to have more.
It's a nonpartisan program that we're using here.
Oh, there you go, nonpartisan.
Okay. Well, speaking of Gary Harbaugh, who submitted that comment, I've asked Gary. Gary's a retired attorney. We don't hold that against him in any way, but I've asked him to give us some comments on some of the judicial overreach that we're seeing in our country today. So I want to play this video of Gary's comments on that particular issue. Okay?
Yep.
Hi, it's Gary with Convention of States, and I have a short comment to make about the judicial overreach. Now, the federal courts were established under Article 3 of the Constitution. Article 3 only establishes the U.S. Supreme Court and leaves it to Congress to establish the lower courts and set their jurisdiction. The Constitution says that the courts are to decide cases and controversies. So it might seem logical to say, and I think the framers intended, that the courts would decide cases, meaning they make rulings related to the parties before them, but would not be involved in making public policy. Alexander Hamilton in Federalist paper said that the courts were the weakest branch of government and could never attack the other branches. Of course, the courts have not paid attention to Hamilton's thoughts about this, and have instead extended their power very broadly. So, in exercising that federal power, one of the things courts have done is entered nationwide injunctions. Now, federal district courts are established that have jurisdiction either in one state or in a part of a state. Federal courts of appeals, the circuit courts of appeals, typically have jurisdiction over a number of states, and obviously the U.S. Supreme Court has jurisdiction, nationwide. But the point is that these federal district courts are entering injunctions, even though their rulings, their power in theory exists only within the state where that court sits. They are entering nationwide injunctions. And this seems to me to be an abuse of federal power. It goes far beyond the deciding of cases and controversies and entering judgments based on those cases and controversies, but is extended into the area of making public policy. And really making public policy is the purview of the legislative and to some degree the executive branches of government. The executive really only within the authority granted by the legislative branch. So what we have really is an overreach by judges, I think, overreaching their power. And this is one of the things that can be addressed by an Article 5 Convention of States. One of the pillars of the COS movement is to put limits on the exercise of federal power, and that could include federal power by the third branch of government, the judicial branch, that has gotten, in some ways, it seems to me at least, out of control. And the court certainly should have the power to enter injunctions as it relates to the parties before it, but to enter nationwide injunctions seems to me to be certainly far beyond what the framers of our Constitution intended. And this is a good time to take a look at that in an Article 5 convention and put limits on the exercise of federal power, because there is clearly judicial overreach going on, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of many other both scholars and lay people who see federal judges extending their tentacles to try to control the executive branch of government in ways that were never intended by the framers of our Constitution. That's how I see it.
I thought those were good comments from Gary. Yeah.
Yeah, good comments, as well as he's looking quite dapper in that video. He did a great job on it, I think.
I like his hat. I'm going to have to comment him on that hat.
Yeah, he had the old dapper suit going on. He looked really good there. So we'll have
He did
more often, I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary.
We're going to have to comment on that. Okay. We got Gary coming back a little bit later in the program on another topic. So anyway, our contributor out of Minnesota, David Pund, who does our Dave's Daily Dose, he's got some ideas on these judges as well. So let's listen to what he has to say.
All together now, let's think this through. It's one of the things we do best as a nation, at least we used to, and somehow it comes out all right. Let's try it again. A federal judge in San Francisco places a temporary injunction order, just temporary, mind you, on a Trump order to cancel TPS, temporary protected status, for a bunch of Venezuelans. There are 350,000 of them in this country. Illegally? Probably. Can he do that? This is Dave's Daily Dose on Brooklyn Road Radio. I'm David Allen Punt. Maybe. Here's a judge in San Francisco in the Northern District of California. Wikipedia tells me that his court has jurisdiction over cases filed within the 15 counties of Alameda, Contra Costa, Del Norte, Humboldt, Lake, Marin, Mendocino, Monterey, Napa, San Benito, San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, and Sonoma. That should be enough for any judge, shouldn't it? That's the area his court has jurisdiction over. Is that where all 350,000 Venezuelans live and work and play? Assumedly, these 350,000 are illegal aliens. Why would they need protected status if they were U.S. citizens? Is this a case of a judge getting out over his skis jurisdictionally? Sounds like it to me. I wonder if he knows Jim Boasberg over at the D.C. district. Maybe they were at the seminar together last summer, the one paid for by all those anti-Trumpers. Charles Grassley has a solution to this judge coloring outside the lines problem. Darrell Issa in the House has worked on a similar law. Josh Hawley from Missouri has one too. The potential laws these guys are working on would require district judges, and perhaps anybody in a position of power, to limit themselves to the areas where they're authorized to work. Grassley's would forbid federal courts from taking up cases that are not from the area. In the case of Eddie Chen in San Francisco, if the case doesn't come from one of his 15 counties, he can't touch it. The magic part of the formula is TRO, the temporary restraining order. Such an order is 1, temporary, and 2, applies to everybody everywhere. But it's temporary until a judge somewhere else grants another order. Temporary, yes, but in effect extends the first order by a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, depending on the case. Does that make sense to you? Me neither. Senator Grassley's bill, the Judicial Relief Clarification Act, would clarify for Judge Eddie, as well as Judge Jim, that they can't do that. I think they already know that, but someone in the seminar told them they could until another court slaps their fingers and tells them they can't. This bill would do that. Makes sense to me, but we'll see how the Democrats in the House and the Senate feel about the amount of sense it makes to them. We'll see. I'm David Allen Pond.
Two good comments. Two good.
Yeah, I think he makes a good point there. These judges have certain jurisdictions.
When I first got involved in Convention of States, federal overreach to me did not seem to be coming from our judicial branch, and the more that we've delved into this, man, I mean it's another tool being used as federal overreach by in general a party. Again, it's just one of those things that I never really anticipated. This level of judicial offices to be able to throw the monkey wrench into our system the way they are doing it today.
Yeah, certainly not in this manner. Right. Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's move on. Ken, a topic that I have long found interesting to me is sanctuary cities and how this all came about. I thought I knew very little history on sanctuary cities and whether they're legal. So obviously they've been in the news a great deal with our immigration problems and situation in our country. But I thought I would put together some thoughts on sanctuary cities, and with the help of AI, I was able to do that. And I learned quite a bit from this. So I want to present, I recorded a piece on it, and I thought we would go and take a look at that right now, and then come back for some more after that's completed. So here I am talking about sanctuary cities.
Okay.
Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, host COS Today. If you're like me, you've heard in the news a great deal about sanctuary cities, and you probably don't know the history behind sanctuary cities, how we got to this point in our country, whether they're legal. So if you're like me, you're kind of you know what's going on, you pay attention to what's going on, but you don't know much of the history behind sanctuary cities. So I'm gonna, with the help of AI, I've put together here a report I think that will kind of give you an overview of what sanctuary cities is all about. And I think I know I've learned some things here, and I hope you'll find it interesting. So let me get started here. Where this all starts is with the 10th Amendment. And if you recall, the 10th Amendment provides a strong legal foundation for sanctuary cities, preventing the federal government from forcing state or local governments to enforce federal immigration laws. The principle is often called the anti-commandeering doctrine and has been upheld in multiple Supreme Court cases. Now, how does this work? Well, to refresh your memory, the 10th Amendment states the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. This means the federal government cannot force state or local officials to enforce federal policies, including immigration laws. Since immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility, sanctuary cities argue that they have the right to refuse cooperation with federal agencies like Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or also known as ICE. Well, let's look at a little further here. Some of the limits of the 10th Amendment protection. While sanctuary cities can refuse to assist in immigration enforcement, they cannot actively obstruct federal agents who are enforcing the law. The federal government can enforce immigration laws on its own, but cannot force local police or jails to do it for them. See, that's kind of interesting, huh? Bottom line here is, yes, the 10th Amendment protects sanctuary cities by ensuring the federal government cannot force local officials to enforce federal immigration laws. However, this remains a politically charged issue with ongoing battles between the federal government and the states and local jurisdictions. So let's talk a little bit about some of the history behind this. And let me get to my next screen here. What I discovered here is that in my research is that it seems like 1980 was kind of a turning point in this country for our modern day concept of sanctuary cities, at least. So let's talk about briefly here what happened from the amendment, the 10th Amendment, up to the 1980s. So the sanctuary cities in the U.S. before 1980s is complex, with roots in constitutional principles, religious movements, that's going to play a big role here, and resistance to federal authority. While the modern concept of sanctuary cities, where local governments limit cooperation with the federal immigration enforcement, gained traction in the 1980s, its foundation goes much further back. Here's an overview of its development from the Bill of Rights, 1791 to 1980. Okay? The Bill of Rights didn't explicitly mention sanctuary policies, but key amendments set the groundwork. For example, of course, then the 10th Amendment, which we're already discussing, but also the 4th Amendment. The 4th Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, later used to argue against immigration raids without warrants. Now, you all probably remember from your history books the Underground Railroad. Well, this was part of the Fugitive Slave Acts, 1793 to 1850. Now, that's where some northern states and cities refused to enforce Fugitive Slave Acts arguing states' rights and moral opposition to slavery. Personal liberty laws in states like Pennsylvania and Massachusetts effectively made them early sanctuary jurisdictions for escaped enslaved people. So the slave movement certainly was part of the development of sanctuary cities. And here is where I think a big role was played by churches. Religious and political sanctuary movements, 1800s to the 1940s. Sanctuary in churches and social movements. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, churches provided shelter to marginalized groups, as, for example, Native Americans, labor activists. Also, Jewish refugees in World War II. So, some cities and religious institutions opposed federal restrictions on Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi Germany. This laid the groundwork for future city-led sanctuary efforts against federal immigration policy. So that was, we're talking about now in World War II in the Jewish refugees fleeing Germany. Okay, and here now we get into one that I was very, very familiar with, the civil rights and Vietnam War resistance. Civil rights movement, the 1950s to the 1960s. Obviously, we all have learned a great deal about the civil rights movements. But here, the other thing was the Vietnam War resistance, the draft resistance. And this was during my time. Some cities, for example, Berkeley, California, provided informal sanctuary to draft resistors, refusing to cooperate with federal enforcement. And this is this I remember this so clearly back in the Vietnam War days. I remember this so clearly. Draft dodgers finding sanctuary in different places. So we had also the emergence of modern day sanctuary movements in the late 70s. By the 1970s, and here we go, churches and cities began offering sanctuary to Central American refugees fleeing U.S.-backed wars in El Salvador and Guatemala. This, of course, then led to formal sanctuary city policies in the 1980s. So let's get now into the 1980s. The sanctuary movement of the 1980s was a religious and political campaign in the United States aimed at protecting Central American refugees fleeing violence and persecution. It emerged in response to U.S. immigration policies that denied asylum to many people escaping brutal conflicts in countries like El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. The movement was rooted in churches and religious organizations. Here's churches again. Okay. Particularly in cities along the U.S.-Mexico border and other progressive communities. Faith-based groups openly defied U.S. immigration laws. Over 500 churches and synagogues across the country became part of the sanctuary movement. Volunteers helped transport refugees, find housing, and provide legal aid and resist deportations. The sanctuary movement influenced later temporary protected status, or TPS, policies. It laid the foundation for modern-day sanctuary cities where local governments refuse to assist federal immigration enforcement. It also helped inspire faith-based immigrant rights activism, with religious organizations continuing to play a role in supporting immigrants. So there we are with the role of the churches was becoming more and more prevalent. So let's talk a bit about, let's go into this temporary protected service, this TPS. Temporary protected status is a humanitarian immigration program in the United States that grants temporary legal status to individuals from countries experiencing armed conflict, national disasters, or other extraordinary conditions that prevent their safe return. TPS, for your information, was established under the Immigration Act of 1990, signed into law by President George H.W. Bush. How do you become eligible for TPS? You be a national of a country designated for TPS or habitual resident of stateless by physically present in the U.S., be physically present in the U.S. when TPS is granted and maintain continuous residence and apply within the specific registration period. Okay. And finally, not have a serious criminal record or pose a security threat. The Department of Homeland Security can designate a country for TPS due to ongoing armed conflict, environmental disasters, or extraordinary and temporary conditions. Okay. This TPS, temporary protected status, is playing a significant role in the whole sanctuary city concept. TPS is granted for 6 to 18 months at a time and can be extended depending upon conditions in the home country. Beneficiaries must reapply each time TPS is renewed. The U.S. government may terminate TPS for a country if conditions improve, leading to deportation risks for recipients. So that's the impact then. Let me go a little bit further here. The impact then of TPS protects hundreds of thousands of immigrants from deportation. I don't know how this is going to be handled. Under the current situation with illegal immigration. Allows beneficiaries to work legally, contribute to the economy, and support families. Sparks political debate over immigration reform and humanitarian protections. No doubt about that. Okay, let's look at now the legal solution here to sanctuary cities. The legal solution to sanctuary cities depends on what perspective you're coming from, whether the goal is to protect sanctuary policies or to eliminate them. Since the issue is rooted, I should say, in the balance of power between federal, state, and local governments. Any solution would likely involve legislation, court rulings, or constitutional amendments. Here are the possible legal approaches. If your goal is to strengthen sanctuary cities, you would want to depend or you would want to be involved in federal legislation protecting sanctuary policies. You would be for court rulings affirming local autonomy. You would be in favor of state laws protecting sanctuary policies. And you would be in favor of creating a path to citizenship or legal status for immigrants. Now, if your goal is to eliminate sanctuary cities, then you're going to be in favor of federal mandates on immigration enforcement. You're going to be supporting Supreme Court ruling limiting local authority. And you would be in favor of state laws banning sanctuary policies. And you would be in favor of federal funding restrictions. So I don't know if I've helped out here or if I've just confused everyone more. But the conclusion that I want to get to here is there's no simple legal solution to sanctuary cities because it involves constitutional rights, state sovereignty, and federal immigration power. To protect sanctuary cities, courts could uphold local autonomy and Congress could pass laws in reinforcing local discretion. To eliminate sanctuary cities, Congress would need to mandate local cooperation, or the Supreme Court would need to weaken the anti-commandeering doctrine. Ultimately, the issue is deeply tied to political will and public opinion. And I think that is very, very a key item here to mention. Meaning the legal landscape could shift depending on which party controls Congress, the presidency, and the courts. Well, folks, I don't know if I've confused you more or helped you in this matter. Hopefully I've helped. But I think the importance here is constitutional amendments. And from my perspective here, I think this is a prime concept for the need for a convention of states, because I don't think our Congress is going to be able to sort this out. Again, I think this depends on political will and public opinion, and I think this needs to be expressed in the form of constitutional amendments. And I think the only way that this is going to come about is by conducting a convention of states. And obviously, we think that is a solution as big as the problem. Once again, now, a convention of states is to propose amendments. We're not creating amendments. We're proposing amendments that then have to be ratified by 38 states. So I hope you have enjoyed and hope you've learned something from this short presentation. Once again, if you would like my notes on this, please send me an email. Let me put that email address up here real quick. raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. So I hope you've enjoyed this and look forward to seeing you once again on another topic of interest. So thank you very much for your attention.
Well, Dale, I think that was an excellent presentation. I think you did some in-depth research on that. There's a lot of things that I didn't know about sanctuary cities, sanctuary laws upon that. To me, it struck me, if I can give my overview thinking after watching your presentation, to me it seemed that all the examples you gave throughout history seemed to be related to war-torn people being granted access as a refugee to our country to protect them in certain situations. And I think what I look at it at, and I never really thought much of it from that standpoint, but to me it seems that when that happens, we are very aware of who these people are, the reason they're coming, and we know who they are. Compared to today's modern day sanctuary cities, where we don't know who these people are. Half of them, I mean, most of them, we don't know who they are. We have no idea really where they're from, or or why they're being led into the country. So I think to a certain degree, it's a matter of obviously. I think I'm in agreement. We need to fix some immigration laws for sure. We need to come up with a policy on immigration for sure that works. Although we already do have many laws in place that we just simply choose to ignore to enforce. But it seems to me that was it, and then it was possible for those people to go back because there was time limits on it, and they had to re-register to continue to stay on. We don't have any of that control right now with sanctuary cities. So I think there's that some of these cities have taken it to the extreme by just willy-nilly letting people in, and as we found, the amount of criminals and gangs and things that are harbored sanctuary cities, it was never the intent of a sanctuary city, and I know for sure the churches aren't involved in harboring these people, which they seem to be, religiously and otherwise faith-based in doing that. And it begs the question, there's thousands of Christians being executed in some of these countries right now as we speak. So I mean, that's my take on it as I listen to everything. And like I said, I think there was some really good research and background on that, but it is it's another one of those footballs that's hard to get a handle on.
Yeah. I never knew that basically it was legal. I never knew where the legalization of it came from. So and I've studied the Constitution, but to find out that it's based from the 10th Amendment, that was news to me, quite honestly. So.
I agree. Yeah. But again, as I said, it seemed to me that all the examples throughout the years had specific attachments to groups or areas that were under certain problems that would allow those types of groups of people to come in. And again, it was one of those things where we knew and kept a tab on who these people were. And that's totally missing from today. There were a couple of comments here that Serdenelf has put in. So I just want to put these up so we can just throw them in as well.
Okay.
He mentioned that if the sanctuary city chooses to not follow federal immigration laws, can the federal government withhold funding until they do? Yeah. But I think to a certain degree, well, yeah, they can, because if the city can operate without the federal and and they can make up certain rules, well, then certainly the feds can turn around and say, well, we're not going to send you any money either. So I think that's the way I see it. Maybe there's
I would agree. I would think so. Yeah.
He had one other comment here. I'll go ahead and put up here. Actually, he has two comments. He got on a roll here, so I'm going to go ahead and throw these up.
Okay.
He says, I don't think the whole country should be strapped with consequences of the choices of a few cities or small groups of people.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yes.
His last comment was, the cities want the immigrants to have a population boom when counted by the census, so they have more influence in congressional numbers than the electoral college. Yeah. So there's another behind the scenes aspect to it, I think, that he's hitting on, that certainly if we were able to get a constitutional amendment, we could rein in on some of that stuff.
Right. Good comments.
Yeah.
All right, Ken. Well, thank you very much. Let's move on here, and we always like to get a little snippet from national as to what's going on nationally in Convention of States. So let's look at the last episode that we received from National.
On COS Now, Texas held a hearing on staying in the movement, Indiana passed 34 ready, and Hawaii volunteers are setting a new petition record. Plus, Rick Santorum rallied supporters, and COS released a new short film on South Carolina's journey. All that and more on COS Now.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Hey everybody, I'm your host Rachel Martin, and you're watching COS Now, the show where we talk about all the latest news in the Convention of States movement. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so that you never miss any upcoming content that we have for you guys. Last Wednesday, the Texas House State Affairs Committee held a public hearing on HJR 98, which would help Texas in the Convention of States movement going forward. Here's Texas State Representative Cody Vasut giving a closing statement.
No amount of litigation from Texas or standing under the 10th Amendment is ever going to force Congress to balance their budget. There is no term limit amendment in the Constitution. The Founding Fathers explicitly put into the Constitution a mechanism by which the states can rein in the federal government. That provision is in Article 5. And all HJR 98 does is exercises Texas's power under that provision to rein in the federal government, directly in line with what our founding fathers intended.
The committee is expected to vote on the resolution at a later date. Earlier on Wednesday, the New Hampshire House of Representatives was scheduled to debate Convention of States. Unfortunately, the House inexplicably voted to table a dozen more bills and resolutions without any real debate, and that included the COS resolution. We want to give kudos to the COS New Hampshire volunteers for getting the bill this far and wish them well in 2026. And now it's time to move on to the final 5 highlights. Last Monday, the Indiana legislature passed 34 Ready, the first state to successfully adopt our model application for instructing commissioners to an Article 5 convention. Less than 24 hours after the Hawaii legislature held a public hearing on Convention of States, the Hawaii team was back at work at a local gun show. They recruited an astounding 356 new petition signers, a single event record for Team Hawaii. Last week, Senator Rick Santorum headlined COS Capitol Day events, otherwise known as Surge Days, in Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Meanwhile, the Georgia and Oregon team reported their recent Surge Days on the COS website. COS supporters are encouraged to attend upcoming Surge Days at their state capitals, including April 2nd in California at 9 a.m. local time and April 7th in Nevada at noon local time. On Saturday, COS released the 3rd short film in the Story of series produced by Jake Fay. This episode focused on the incredible story of perseverance behind South Carolina's journey to join the Article 5 movement.
For nearly a decade, the grassroots aimed for ubiquity. Our volunteer political operatives were inescapable, exerting tremendous grassroots pressure on legislators wherever they went.
You can watch the full film on Convention of States YouTube or Rumble. And that's all for this week's recap. Be sure to check us out on other social media platforms, leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you same time next week here on COS Now.
Well, good. Got a good little recap there of what's happening. I think, if I'm correct, I believe that bill in Texas did pass.
I think that's what I heard as well. Yes.
Yeah, I think that was to remove the sunset clause on it. I think. But
Yes, that's what Mark Meckler has said, that it was there to remove the sunset clause. You're right.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, listen, we got our friend Gary Harbaugh. He also kind of tracks Doge for us, and so he sent us a little update on what he thinks is going on with Doge. So I'd like to play that for everyone right now.
As I mentioned, the national debt is now over $36.5 trillion. And you've probably heard that Doge has identified some $4.7 trillion in spending that is virtually impossible to trace. They don't know where it went or why. $4.7 trillion, that's a lot of money. If we go back 10 years ago, the federal debt was about half of what it is now. Beginning of 2015, it was 18 trillion. Today, 36 trillion. What that means, and I'm assuming that this 4.7 trillion in untraceable spending could be just from the Biden administration. I'm going to guess maybe it goes back further than that. I'm just saying that if it all accumulated in the last 10 years, that's over 1/4 of the rise in the federal debt came from money that we do not know where it went or why. One of the things Trump has done is ordered that no spending goes out without this code so that it can be identified. But it also, as a tax-paying citizen, as a part of convention of states, I think we can see it's obvious. We ought to stop all of this. We have to create transparency so anybody can go on to a government website and see where the money is going and gives us the opportunity to question it. One of the things that Doge has revealed is that ginormous amounts of money are going for things that, wow, we have no idea what the real benefit is. And in fact, what we see is that we can't imagine that there is any real benefit to the US taxpayers from this spending. So Doge is doing good work. We want to continue to get transparency. And what we really need is a convention of states to stop the unnecessary spending that is not in the interest of taxpayers. We need to put limits on federal spending, limits on the exercise of federal power, so that we get the federal government back under the control of we the people.
Well, another good insight from Gary. And I tell you, this Doge is just this has got to become a permanent thing, I think, and permanent part of our government. It's just
we certainly can't keep going doing the things we've been doing for the last 40 years. It's obviously got us to where we're at. So I think he's right. You look at the amount of the explosion in what's been spent, and again,
it's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing.
It blows your mind. It really does. And again, I think at this point, you and I have both talked about this before. We're not so much in this for ourselves. We're really in this for our kids and grandkids. It's really not fair to these next generations to have to be saddled with this kind of debt that they probably would never get to pay off in their lifetime.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Brent, Ken.
Did I lose my hair?
Yeah, you don't want to look like Brett and I.
Well, don't tell him that.
Anyway, I promised that I'd come back with part 2 of the presentation from Brett on university endowments. So let's get to that now. I'm gonna give it a full screen again, so you and I will disappear. But hopefully I'll be able to recover us again once it's over. Okay?
Okay.
Here we go. Welcome back, folks. Dale Parrish hosts COS today, and we're going to continue our conversation with Brett Sturley, and who is giving us a presentation on university endowments. So let's bring Brett back on here. Thanks for hanging on, Brett.
Hey, you bet, Dale. Happy to do it.
Okay. Well, Brett, we left off. We had talked about endowments, and we had looked at some various school endowments, and the biggest to the smallest, and you gave us a very, very wide view of university endowments. And I think you were wanting to get to now getting into the weeds on some of these. Am I correct?
Just a little bit. Just try to paint the rest of the picture of the landscape that we're looking at, and then get into what are my idea of remaking the financing of college tuition.
Okay. Well, I think this is where we left off. All right. So
yes. So we looked at the top 25 schools, the top 10 schools, a little bit more granular level, but the top 25 schools overall, and looked at their endowments and their tuition. And so, I mean, that's great, but that's on the premier one end of the spectrum. Those are the absolute elite schools. So I wanted to look at some averages here as well. and give you an idea of the size of what we're talking about. So the average university endowment, this is the average across all accredited schools. And again, this is per Statista, which is an excellent resource for statistics and analysis. The average size of university endowment is $244 million. That's across all.
That's all
accredited universities.
All accredited. Okay.
If you roll that up, the total value of university endowments for accredited universities is $837.720 billion. So this is you're closing in on $1 trillion worth of value in these endowments across these accredited universities. That's pretty incredible.
Wow.
So, and we looked at the tuition payments, with these universities, $40,000 to $70,000 a year plus living expenses. Total student debt that is the total liability that's actually taken out for tuition by students currently is right at $1.77 trillion. So just a massive amount of money there.
Wow.
86% of that outstanding debt is currently secured and underwritten and financed by the United States government. Translated, the U.S. taxpayers, you and I. So that comes out to just a little over $1.5 trillion is the exposure that we, the taxpayers, have if every student that has a student loan just stopped paying it. Or, as Joe Biden did unconstitutionally 4 times in his administration, quote unquote, forgave the debt. There is no forgiving of debt. The debt still, this debt still exists. The only difference is it's forgiven for the person who actually signed the document, the loan document, and voluntarily took out that loan
and promised to repay it. And promised to repay it.
Promised to repay it, and it's forced upon just on the taxpayers to assume that debt. If you think of it like your mortgage, we're like, well, these people have been paying on this for 15 years, and it's just not fair, and wah. Well, you know what? Lots of us have been paying on our mortgages for 15 years, and I can't go to my mortgage company and say, you know what? I paid on time for 15 years. I'm kind of tired. Why don't you just go ahead and forgive my debt? And they're like, no, I don't think we'll do that. You stop paying and we'll take your house. How about that? So it's a contract. They didn't have a gun held to their head that you have to sign this. You have to go to this college and go into debt this much. So this is just, I just don't get it. It just does not make any sense. Yeah. So the average student loan debt per borrower is $38,374. So if you divide that $1.77 trillion by everyone who has a student loan, it comes down to an average liability of $38,374. And then again, these stats are from Statista. And if you look at, we always talk about inflation, there's around the tariff argument, the tariff discussion that we had, there's lots of talk about, was this going to cause inflation? Obviously, our inflation rate's right around 2.8%. The Fed target is between 2 and 2.5%. Well, the average student tuition inflation rate over the past 40 years is 8% per year. So it's a multiple, 3 to 4 times what our average inflation rate is in the general economy. Yeah. So there has to be reasons for that. And in thinking about this, it seems that the reason might be that the more that you separate the consumer from the provider, that introduces all types of space for inefficiencies and a lot of area to where people can, agencies, bureaucracies can grift and get their little piece of the puzzle, piece of the pie as it goes through this whole entire funding mechanism. So I thought, is there a better way to do this? And why should I, as a taxpayer, be on the hook for someone else's student loan debt that I didn't have any input on them even taking that debt on. I didn't have any input on what they were going to study at university. I did not have any input on, to force them to study. It was like, hey, you know what? Stop wasting my money. And I want you to get a good education. I paid back my student debt. Nobody helped me because that was my obligation. This used to be the American way. You incur a debt, you pay it back. Pretty easy. So that got me thinking about, if we flip to the next slide there, of how else can we do this? So what I thought is, with these university endowments, the university is the provider, the student is the consumer. So let's put them back together. So why don't we have universities guarantee, basically co-sign for the tuition loans that their student body, the students in their student body that attend that university, that they incur. So to me, that would do several different things. One, that would incentivize the university to provide their students with a degree that would enable them to actually repay their student loans. So if, let's say it's going to cost me to go to Duke University, it costs me $100,000 a year. I graduate in 4 years. I have $400,000 in debt. I took a $400,000 loan out. Duke University's endowment is basically underwriting that loan. So if I default on that, then it's not going to go back to the taxpayer. It's going to go back to the university, the provider that gave me the education. Now, it would behoove the university, the provider, then to make sure that I got an education and I was prepared to at least make enough money to where I could pay off that $400,000. So Duke University, I'm not on the hook for that, because if you would do this for several different students, well, pretty soon that kind of dwindles that endowment down just a little bit. So that is, and that also connects the relationship between the student and the university, to where the student can go back and demand, hey, I'm going into debt $400,000. Provide me an education that prepares me for life to be a productive member of society. I want to pay this back. And you know what? I could go to the local community college and go here for 4 years, graduate for $20,000. I'm paying you $400,000. I want $400,000 worth of value.
So the university, that's not in the university equation at all today.
No, it is not. The university is completely out of the loop.
Right. Okay.
So then the other thing, one of the other things it would do, it would then be in the best interest of the university to limit the cost of tuition, because that would decrease their potential loan exposure.
Right.
If they're guaranteeing these loans, and we saw that university tuition increases at 3 to 4 times the inflation rate in the general economy. Well, that might incentivize that university. Say that, Elizabeth Warren, for one, was teaching at, where was she teaching? She might have been teaching at Columbia. She sounds like she fit right in there. But she was teaching one class. She was making $400,000 a year teaching one class.
She must have been really good, though, Brett.
She must have been fantastic. She must have been a whole lot better professor than what she is a United States senator.
Right, I'm sure.
So those are the things that happen whenever there's no accountability and there's no connection to the money to operate a university.
Right.
There's no incentive there to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we're not going to pay you that much. We're going to attract the best talent we can, but we're not going to pay you $400,000 a class.
Right.
So that's an incentive for the university to be more price conscious and more efficient.
Right.
Also, enrollment would be better allocated to students that actually want to go and belong in college. If you look at I mean, there's several. You see this. You can do these man on the street interviews whenever they go to college campuses, and you can interview some of these students, and it's amazing how they can put their clothes on in the morning because they absolutely know nothing. And so a lot of these students are going to school because, hey, you know what? I'm going to school because my parents went here and they want me to go to school, and it puts me off having to go to work and being an adult for 4 years. I can sit here and party.
Yeah.
That helps clean those people out and get them out of that whole entire system.
Okay.
So then you reintroduce these free market principles back into the post-graduation marketplace. And by incentivizing the student to actually demand value for their education dollar, for the university, because they're going to be on the hook. They're liable for this debt if they continue to churn out a bunch of stupid students. Then they're going to have a lot of debt to pay back. And finally, it takes the taxpayers that completely off the hook to repay another borrower's loans. And whenever this was discussed, the left always likes to talk about fairness. So I did some research at that time. About 1/3 of college graduates of high school graduates go on to college. So that leaves about 2/3 of high school graduates that don't. They might go to vocational school. They're getting education somewhere in some other aspect, some other venue. The data shows that on average, a college graduate will out-earn a high school graduate by about $1.2 million over their lifetime. So when we're talking about fairness, so you're telling me that a welder, even though welders are well paid, or maybe a line cook, somebody who's gainfully employed, maybe making $40,000-$50,000 a year. So how is it fair that person is on the hook for repaying the loan for a Yale graduate that gets their degree in lesbian dance theory and can't get a job, and so now I've got $400,000 worth of debt, and a president acted unconstitutionally and forgave that debt, and they're going to have this line cook pay for my debt. How is that fair? That's not fair at all. And to me, that is something that, whenever I was thinking through this, the universities certainly won't like it because they're basically getting off scot-free here right now and can, crank up university tuition as much as they want. And, people continue to pay it because the government continues to fund it. But as far as this being a better system to give us a more productive, more talented workforce and, increase the economic activity and the economic well-being of America, seems to make sense to me. I don't know if it does to anybody else. I'd love to hear some input. I guess, what do you think, Dale? Am I on my tree?
Well, I think these proposals are very good. I don't know. What's crossing my mind now is how do you implement this? How does this come about? Do we need congressional involvement to make some of this happen, or how does this come about? How does this happen?
Well, congressional action would be nice, since this was, I think, since the theory is what's made by constitutional amendment has to have a constitutional amendment to undo it. What's made by congressional action has to have congressional action to undo it. What's made by executive authority has to have executive authority to undo it. So congressional action would certainly be great. Showing their propensity that they're having problems, even decreasing the amount of the federal budget here right now. I don't have a lot of confidence in that, but that would be the best way to do this.
Of course, one of the things that I guess could get the ball rolling would be for the government to no longer guarantee student loans.
Absolutely. When you're looking at
when I went to school, I had to get my loan through a bank. I had to go to a local bank. Now, quite honestly, I don't know, was the bank on the line for that loan, or was the government guaranteeing that loan to the bank? I'm not sure. But
The bank was on the hook for that student loan where I went. I graduated undergraduate in 1992. So whenever I went from 87 to 92, the bank was liable for that. I believe it was in the Obama administration, and that's whenever they took all the student loan, the whole entire student loan program, and made it a public entity under the purview of the federal government, guaranteed by the federal government, which the federal government is barely able to guarantee its operating debt here right now. I don't think that there's any reason why they should look for other debt to assume, especially in areas where they have absolutely no constitutional authority. Because if you think back with Thomas Jefferson was asked, what is the federal government's role in education? That's at the elementary level, at the secondary level, and it would extend to the university level as well. And Thomas Jefferson basically said they have no role without a constitutional amendment. Well, last time I checked the Constitution, one of the 27 amendments was not the federal government shall fund fund education for all people. That's not in there.
Well, we
and
know.
So,
I'm sorry. We know, Brett, there's a lot of money out there amongst the colleges and universities, and it certainly could be used in better ways, it seems. So,
well, 100%. I think this is a conversation that is starting with President Trump. It's charging Linda McMahon to shut down the Department of Education. Every single state has its own Department of Education. There's absolutely no reason for the federal Department of Education to exist.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything besides feed a bureaucracy and a bunch of bureaucrats. It does basically nothing that the states can't do themselves and can't do better. Now, some states are going to do worse. That's for sure. But you know what? The state governments are a whole lot more accountable and responsive to their constituents because it's closer to the people.
Yeah.
It's closer to the actual grassroots. And so that would be something that, if you live in a state that is still having failing schools, which I'm sure that they will, then the taxpayers at some point will demand a change, and it's the state government will be a lot more responsive than what the federal government is.
Brett, that is a wrap, my man. I want to thank you for doing this. I've learned a lot from this. Don't know the exact answer, but I think it's definitely something that hopefully our country will be looking at here, and hopefully we'll see an answer to this.
Well,
perhaps
I hope so.
Perhaps conducting a convention of states where we could propose constitutional amendments, that might help resolve something like this, huh?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's one of under a Convention of States Actions resolution. Limiting the size, scope, and jurisdiction of the federal government is one of those subject matter areas. So we absolutely could do that. And I don't like to point out problems without trying to point out a solution. So this is a possible solution. Don't know if it's the best one, but maybe this helps continue the conversation.
As we always say, it's a solution as big as the problem.
100%.
So, Brett, thanks a lot, my man. Thank you very much. Look forward to your next report, okay?
Thanks, Dale. I appreciate the invitation back.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You as well.
Well, folks, that's a wrap for us on University Endowments with Brett Sturley. So hope you've enjoyed it, and look forward to having Brett back on again. Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone. Well, I'll tell you, Brett does a good job.
Did an excellent job on that. Very, very, very insightful, and a lot of good stats that went with that. I agree.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
You have another comment? I'm going to go ahead and throw this up because it wasn't brought up in this, and I'm sure we know the answer. Well, I'm pretty sure we know the answer. I know you will have the answer. Cernel says, were vocational schools affected by the loan forgiveness the way as college loans were? And I'm not aware of any vocational schools that were affected.
I'm not either.
This was definitely towards regular universities, not trade schools.
Okay. All right. Ken, let's move on here. We got some things coming up. I want to talk a little bit about what's coming up on COS today. And our next broadcast is going to be on the 14th of April. And it's going to be Understanding Crypto. Our own Charlie Myers is going to be on the hot spot, be on the hot seat, and field questions, any and all questions regarding crypto. And believe me, I don't know about you, Ken. I know you've been involved in this a little bit. I haven't, so I've got a lot of questions about this. Starting.
There's a lot to it. There really is. There's a lot to it.
Starting from the very basic thing of what the heck is it, And so Charlie's been involved in this a great deal, and he's agreed to come on and field any and all questions. So we're gonna treat that, and we're gonna go with it next Monday, as long as it takes to entertain all the questions. And I might say, if you're viewing tonight and you want to submit a question and you can't view or you can't attend next Monday's broadcast, give us your questions. Send us your email to us at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's our email address, raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. Send us your questions, and we will do our best to get those involved and get those in front of Charlie. Okay. The 21st of April, this should be an interesting one too. We've got another one of our contributors that wants to talk about our military that's now at our southern border. And I know he's a former military guy. Tim Heidenreich is going to do this. And he wants to talk about the ins and outs and ramifications of our military being now at our southern border. Then coming up on the 28th of April is our next roundtable. And the topic for this roundtable is going to be the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. I certainly not much to talk about there, Ken. I don't think so, but no. That ought to be a good one. That ought to be another good one. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting. By the way, I hope Brett hasn't offended. If there are any lesbian dance theory graduates out there, I hope Brett hasn't offended them in any way.
Got to have some thick skin by now.
I guess so. Well, let's start winding up here, and let's take a look at another COS basics from John Ackerman. And when that's done, we'll come back and say goodnight to everyone and let Maringo Mike sign us off this evening. So here we go with John Ackerman and COS basics.
John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana. This is number 10 in our series of COS Basics, and the topic this time is grassroots engagement. The whole idea here is Convention of States is a national movement, and so what can one person like you or me do on a local level to make a difference? And so I have a few suggestions today how you can get involved in grassroots engagement. First of all, and perhaps most important, is to volunteer to become a district captain. Every state in the union is divided into legislative districts, and we need a district captain in every one of those. Now, don't worry. If your district already has a captain And if you're good enough, just joking, you can be a captain of a nearby district. Just start the application process and get involved with your state director. Another way you can get involved on the grassroots level is to become a state leader. We need region captains. I can talk. We need legislative liaisons. We need follow-up team members, and on and on and on. We have all kinds of state level positions that are open, probably in every one of the 50 states. And you can be a volunteer activist. You can do block walking. You can set up a COS booth at a local event, a farmer's market or something like that. You can take COS university courses to learn about Article 5 and the Convention of States. To do that, just go to cosuniversity.com, and there you'll be amazed at the array of free classes that you can take. Just the first four I'll name. I don't have time to name all of them, but there is an introduction to Convention of States. There's an introduction to volunteering. There's a course on responding to opposition, and believe you me, there's plenty of opposition. And there's a course on constitutional literacy. Yeah, I'm having trouble talking today. Constitutional literacy. So those are just the first four courses, and there's a slew of others. There's as much learning there as you have time to do. And you can also attend the Tuesday training webinar that's held every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, or you can view recordings of the past webinars. You can watch Mark Meckler's Battle Cry on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the COS Facebook page. You can watch COS live Tuesday evenings, 6 p.m. on the COS Facebook page. You can spend some time on our website, conventionofstates.com, learning about COS so that you're comfortable discussing the basics of Article 5. You can sign up to attend a Constitution class with Mark Meckler and Rick Green. You can attend a local government, school board, or political party meeting to observe and learn about what's going on in your area. There's no end to the things you can do to get involved on the grassroots level to promote Convention of States. Oh yeah, you want to get involved on the grassroots level? We got you covered.
All right. Another good one from John. Oh, somebody, you're muted, Ken.
And I just said back to the basics. Yes, another good one.
Yep. Well, Ken, let's wrap it up for this evening with Maringo Mike. I think we've had a good show tonight. We certainly had some number of comments, and so I think we had a good show tonight. So I hope everyone's okay, and looking forward to, again, next Monday with Charlie Myers on learning more about cryptocurrency. So ought to be a good one. So any other comments or anything from our viewers, Ken, that we need to look at tonight before we sign off?
I can even talk at this point.
You can talk too, can't you? Okay.
Yeah, hey, it's these extended hours we're doing here that's kind of wearing on my tongue, I guess.
We are going a little longer then, aren't we?
That's okay. No, it's just an upcoming question about crypto, and that will either show up in our Gmail, or they'll be live for next week's presentation. So I hope Charlie's ready to surpass the recent Congress record of 25 hours. We might have to go 25 hours.
I don't know. He'll be by himself if he does that long, I'll tell you. But I think this is going to be a good one, because I think this is my guess is this is a mystery to a lot of us out here, and but we'll see. We'll see.
We will.
All right, Ken. Have a good evening. We'll see you, bud.
Good night, everybody.
Marengo Mike here with a reminder that our work to raise Marengo Mike here with a reminder that our work to raise the bar on making our federal government accountable to the people is only halfway done. We need to grow our grassroots army of citizens every day to fulfill the vision of our forefathers and keep our land free and prosperous. So, if you have never signed the petition to show your support, use that QR code and do that now. While you're there, why not kick it up a notch and volunteer for many of the positions available where your talents can make a difference as we march into a new year. Thank you, and God bless.